Priscilla Wiley was born in the village of Jednay in Lincolnshire in 1833. The village is dominated by the impressive Church of St. Mary Magdalene, commonly known as the Church of the Fens. Jednay was a farming community, and like so many areas of England at the time, it had seen its fair share of hardship. Although little is known of Priscilla's early life, in that part of the world it would have been largely unremarkable. In 1855, at the age of 22, Priscilla married Richard Biggadike, a young man of the same age who worked as a well sinker. A physically demanding job, it's clear that Richard was a strong and healthy individual. The young couple made a home for themselves in a two-roomed cottage and proceeded to have 3 children over the coming years. While Richard had a good job, in the late 1860s it became necessary for the family to supplement their income by taking in 2 lodgers, 30-year-old labourer Tom Proctor and 21-year-old fisherman George Ironmonger. The small cottage soon became very cramped. Richard and Priscilla shared a bed, while Tom and George shared another in the same room. Moreover, Priscilla had recently given birth to a baby. Living on top of each other couldn't have been easy, and as Richard's marriage to Priscilla began to disintegrate in 1868, Richard suspected that his wife was cheating on him with Tom Proctor. He even went as far as to suggest that the new baby had been fathered by the labourer. When he accused her of being unfaithful to him, Priscilla would only say, "Oh well, it is mine," which did not dispel Richard's fears. On the afternoon of Wednesday the 30th of September, Priscilla baked shortcake. Proctor and Ironmonger enjoyed a slice of it, while the rest was left over for when Richard returned from work at 6 p.m. When Priscilla offered her husband a piece of it later that day, she also made tea for him. However, minutes after drinking it, Richard became violently ill. The local doctor, a man named Maxwell, came immediately. Observing the excruciating agony Richard was in, he suspected poisoning. That night Richard's condition deteriorated quickly and he died the following morning at 6 a.m. Fearing that Richard had met his death by deliberate killing, he ordered a post-mortem, where it was discovered that his stomach was severely inflamed. At the subsequent inquest, Dr. Maxwell gave evidence that Richard Biggadike had indeed been poisoned. The coroner then ordered the stomach be sent to London for further tests. Gossip spread like wildfire in the village. People suspected that Priscilla had poisoned her husband so she could be free to take up with Proctor, who everyone believed was her lover. Accusations and suspicions made the inhabitants of the cottage turn on each other. Priscilla accused Proctor of administering the poison in her husband's tea. She even told the police that she had seen him put a strange powder into the teacup, as well as a second dose in the bottle of medicine Richard took for back pain. On Monday the 19th of October, Priscilla was arrested and detained while tests were carried out on Richard's stomach. While in custody, Priscilla seemingly made a statement to the governor of Spilsbury House of Correction, in which she confessed to administering the poison, but claimed Proctor was her accomplice in the murder. As a result, Proctor was also arrested and charged with murder. The inquest resumed on the 23rd of October at the Rose and Crown Inn. In a dramatic fashion, Professor Taylor of Guy's Hospital in London came and testified, saying that he had received certain jars from Superintendent Wright containing the contents of the stomach of Richard Biggadike. There was not the slightest doubt the deceased had died through the administration of arsenic. Priscilla and Proctor were committed for trial, which was held at the Lincolnshire Assizes. At the start of the proceedings, Mr. Justice Biles recommended to the jury that the case against Proctor should be dismissed as it was based only on the accusations of Priscilla Biggadike. Proctor was free to go. Priscilla would stand trial alone. Witnesses were brought into the box to testify. One of Richard's colleagues, James Turner, told the court that on the day of Richard's death, he had been in good health before going home. The jury then heard evidence from Proctor, who testified that he had not laced Richard's evening tea with arsenic. A woman named Eliza Turner then told the court that she was very familiar with Richard and Priscilla, and visited their cottage on occasion. On one of these visits she remarked that she was having trouble with mice eating through her flour bags, and Priscilla offered her some white mercury so she might kill them. Eliza Turner said that her husband would not have any of that old stuff in his house, so the offer was declined. Things were not looking good for Priscilla, but her counsel, Mr. Lawrence, mounted a spirited defense. He implored the jury to carefully consider that several people could have administered the poison to Richard Biggadike. After all, apart from Priscilla, there were 2 other adults in the house. It could even have been Richard himself, for like a lot of people in the area, he was illiterate and might not have realized what he was taking. Alas, other than trying to cast suspicion on the other residents of the Biggadike cottage, there was little Mr. Lawrence could do for his client. At the end of the trial, the jury did not even retire to consider their verdict. They found Priscilla Biggadike guilty of willful murder, although they made a recommendation for mercy on the basis that the evidence was circumstantial. Notwithstanding this request, Justice Biles donned the black cap and condemned Priscilla Biggadike to death by hanging. He told her that while the evidence against her was indeed circumstantial, to him it was the most satisfactory and conclusive than he had heard in his life. He encouraged her to prepare for death and heed religious instruction, which she had apparently not heeded before, otherwise she would not have found herself standing before him. He repeated the same words every convicted felon heard upon being sentenced. The sentence of the court is that you will be taken to the place from whence you came, and thence to the place of execution, there to be hanged by the neck until you be dead, and may the Lord have mercy upon your soul. Your body to be buried within the precincts of the prison. While in the condemned cell, Priscilla was visited by her family on the 27th of December, where she said her final goodbyes to her loved ones. The hanging was set for the following morning. The gallows stood several hundred feet away from her cell. The hangman was a man named Thomas Arscon. At 8:45 on Monday morning, he tied Priscilla's feet and hands, and she was led to the scaffold by 2 warders. Accounts from the time state that Priscilla wept piteously and appeared hardly to hear the chaplain reading the service for the dying. According to the warders, Priscilla said to them she hoped her troubles were ended, and asked if the proceedings would take much longer. The warder replied that it wouldn't. Reverend Richter, who stood at her side, encouraged Priscilla not to take any secrets she might still have to the grave. He implored her not to die without confessing her sins. He asked her outright if she still held herself to be innocent. Priscilla answered with a single word, yes. Priscilla climbed onto the scaffold where she professed astonishment that Arscon was actually going to go through with the hanging. As the bell of Lincoln Cathedral told the hour, Arscon released the trap. Priscilla's body dropped and she struggled for several minutes before her body finally stopped moving. Outside, a crowd of 100 people had gathered to hear word of her hanging. Unlike executions up until that point, which were held in public, Priscilla Biggadike's hanging has the unusual distinction of being the first to be held in private. She was buried in the grounds of the prison. But the story of Priscilla Biggadike does not end there. 14 years later, in 1882, Thomas Proctor, one of the lodgers in the Biggadike cottage, and the man who had narrowly escaped being tried for Richard's death, found himself on his own deathbed. Unwilling to meet his maker without confessing his sins, he admitted that he had indeed put white powder into Richard Biggadike's cup and medicine. Priscilla had been right when she had accused him of doing this. However, if she had indeed observed Proctor doing this, why then did she knowingly pour tea into her husband's cup and allow him to drink it? Had the 2 of them then conspired to get Richard out of the way so they could be together after all? Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe.